And so what happens is there's all this repressed anger from the past, and it's dormant. It's like a dormant volcano. But then what happens, there's a trigger. And that trigger creates more lava, and gradually more lava, and then something else happened. But externally, that person just seems like they're totally passive. They seem like they're totally chilled. There's no anger. Like everything is all good. But that anger is building up inside, building up, building up, building, until eventually there's one more trigger, and then bang, they just go from 0 to 100. And it's just like, where did that come from? So, a warm welcome to everybody. Today, we are discussing when childhood anger is denied, and specifically what happens when there is repressed anger. So, I wanted to start with this almost like a catchphrase. I'm going to show you this animation, and can you tell me what is this depicting? Anger is one letter away from danger. So, today, I'll be asking you to put your seatbelts on. We are going to go on a journey. So, yeah, buckle in. So, our mission today, we're going to ask the question. We're going to start by asking the question, is anger bad? And then, why does anger arise in the first place? What is repressed anger and what are some of its symptoms? And then, how do we release the anger from the past? So, let's start off by looking at, is anger bad? Let's address that question, because often we may be programmed to think that anger is bad, but that isn't necessarily the case, because anger is an emotion, just like any other emotion. If you take the word emotion, it's interesting. Emotion stands for energy in motion. So anger by itself is not bad. Why? Because it's just an energy. It's like saying electricity is bad. Electricity by itself is not bad. It's what you do with that electricity is what determines whether it's good or bad. Same with a knife. A knife is not bad, but it's just how you use it. So there's one story I wanted to share. So one monk, he used to go to the prisons, and he used to go and speak to people and try to inspire them spiritually. And one time he went to a prison, he saw a very young lad there. And he was very curious as to why that person was there. So we asked him his story. And this person said that one day he was at college, and another student said something that triggered him so badly, he just completely lost the plot. He attacked that other student, and he was just punching and punching and punching and punching until he killed the other student. And while he was there in the prison, he was like crying. He was talking to this monk, and he was like crying, and he was saying, I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I did that. So this is obviously an extreme case, but it highlights what we're going to be talking about today, how rage can overcome us. And hopefully today you'll get a better understanding of why that is the case. So let's look at, why do we get angry? So generally what happens is, if there is an unfulfilled expectation, then that triggers the emotion of anger. So an expectation is where there is a strong belief that a certain thing will happen. So whether we realize it or not, we all have unconscious rules, and these are almost like expectations at the unconscious level. When somebody transgresses that rule, then we are aware of it. Then that anger arises. So, for example, you could have you could have an unmarried girl, and especially somebody who's a little bit naive, and maybe has read a lot of fairy tales. And so her unconscious rule for her husband could be something like, he should love me unconditionally. Now, if you ask any wife, is that always the case? Is that always true that your husband loves you unconditionally, and every single moment he just knows exactly what to say, and he knows to wash the dishes, and he knows to do all those things? Yeah, let's be a bit more realistic here. But if somebody carries that unconscious rule, My husband will love me unconditionally always. Now, what is that going to lead to naturally? Somebody might have a rule, a husband might have a rule for his wife. She should respect me always. So what happens when she doesn't? A father may have a rule for his kids. My kids should obey me all the time. Now, is that realistic for young kids especially? But you can see parents get very, very angry when their kids don't listen to them, when their kids don't obey them. And then we have maybe a boss or a manager, and his mood is, I have to be right always. And so when he's not right, what happens? As in, when he's proven wrong, what happens? He gets angry. So when expectations are not met, that's when the anger rises. Now, I've given you a few examples there. Let me give you a few, shall we say, other situations. So when a boundary is transgressed, so for example, if somebody invades your phone privacy, like a work colleague, takes your phone and starts looking at private pictures, like that's total transgression of a boundary. You might feel attacked or abused. It might be that you feel invalidated. Now, this is especially true of a loved one because we have the expectation that they will take our side. We have the expectation they'll understand us always. They'll validate our emotions. Sometimes they don't, especially when they're the ones who are being, shall we say, blamed or attacked. We may feel angry or an expectation is not met when we're treated unfairly. For example, we expect the boss at work to treat everyone fairly. What happens when you feel he or she hasn't treated you correctly, fairly? An expectation is transgressed when we feel deceived or cheated because we expect, just as we don't cheat other people, we expect other people not to cheat or deceive us. So these are reasons why anger can be expressed. These are reasons why the emotion of anger comes up because it's indicating to us that some kind of expectation or boundary has been transgressed. So it can help. So it indicates there's a problem. And anger, because it is quite a, shall we say, um, energetic emotion, it sometimes helps us to motivate us to actually take action. So, for example, maybe we have been sitting quietly, but then something happens and it motivates us to actually speak out. Sometimes it motivates us to stop procrastinating. A classic example is, we may get on the scales, the weighing scales, and then see our weight. Or we may take our shirt off and look in the mirror and see the I was going to say blubber, the belly fat shaking around, and that may trigger the emotion of anger. You know what? I need to do something. You know what? I'm going to go out and exercise. I'm actually going to do it. Stop procrastinating. So it helps. It motivates us to stop procrastinating. And then the emotion of anger also prepares us for a fight or flight response in that situation. The emotion of anger comes up, we're flooded with cortisol, adrenaline, ready to take action physically. Now, how do we know it's a healthy anger? Because after the incident, that anger subsides and it subsides quite quickly. And you'll feel that the emotion has physically left your body. So when we say it subsides, it's not just, shall we say, at the mental level, it's actually gone from your body. And as a result of that, it means we don't dwell on that anger for hours and hours and hours afterwards. Of course, this is different when we're going to talk about repressed anger or anger from trauma. Of course, we'll come to that in a few minutes. And then this is an interesting one. The level of anger that we um, express is proportionate to the actual incident. Now, when we talk about repressed anger, you'll see that's actually not the case. With repressed anger, you'll see the level of anger is completely disproportionate to the incident. For example, road rage, which we'll talk about later. So, but when it's a healthy anger, our anger is at a proportionate level to the incident. That's good. Now, what happens when anger is not expressed. So we've just spoken there about how when a boundary is transgressed or infringed upon, anger arises. But now, what happens when that anger is not able to be expressed? Now, the situations could be, especially when you were a child. The situation could also be even in adulthood, for example, when somebody's with a narcissistic partner. So I'm gonna talk about both examples, but there could be other situations as well where that anger is not allowed to be expressed for whatever reason. But let's explore these two. So, for example, some of us may have grown up in a dysfunctional household. So, by dysfunctional, what it means is where the child, where you especially as a child, may have experienced conflict or abuse from your caregivers, from the parents, whether it's babysitter, even at nursery, like that. And then also, even if it's the child witnessing the adults in the family having conflicts. So it could even be an elder sibling fighting with the parents. It could be the parents fighting with each other. And there's physical or even verbal abuse going on. That's not even necessary to the child directly. It's just even just witnessing that. It can be very traumatic and can raise emotions of anger, especially when it's a person who the child very much cares about or can see that is being unfairly treated. Anger may arise. But in that situation, the child may not be in a position to actually express that anger. Then it could be a situation where the child is neglected by the caregiver. And naturally, there is an expectation on the parent to give love, to give attention, to be cuddled, to have that physical affection. And when that's not given, that can bring up levels of anger. But in certain situations, the child can't express it for whatever reason. And then if the environment is very tense, very hostile, there's a lot of yelling and screaming, or even sometimes there's silent hostility, the parents are not talking to each other, or the child asks for something and you can see that the parent is not talking. There's sometimes breaking things in the house, blaming, name calling, so many things like this. So this is a dysfunctional household, and especially where the child is not able to express, because it's not safe to express. So one of the reasons why it might not be safe to express is because the child could be beaten, shouted at, or in extreme cases, the child could even be killed. So anyway, whatever the reason is that the child isn't expressing, the point is ultimately that anger has to go somewhere. Sometimes it's even the parents don't allow the child to express. So for example, they may say something like, anger isn't good. Like, don't express your anger. Don't be angry. Why are you angry? Like that. In other words, they're pushing down the child expressing of the anger. Even though, sorry to say this, even though the parents are angry, but they won't allow the child to be angry. They may say something like, don't talk back to your elders. And they'll say it very angrily. Be respectful to your elders no matter what they do. Doesn't matter what I do, you be respectful. And sometimes we hear that. And as a child, eventually we have to obey. And so even though we feel unfairly treated, even though we feel the punishment, the admonishment may be unfair, what can we do? And the child stays quiet. Now, I've spoken about situations where it could be a child. What about in adulthood? So one situation is if there is a narcissistic partner. So for example, the narcissistic partner may be gaslighting. And sometimes it's the case where the partner is blatantly cheating on the partner. But if the partner raises the issue, they'll get violent. So what does the victim have to do? Even though the victim can see what's going on blatantly, they have to stay quiet. And if not, they're gaslighted to thinking like, oh my God, am I crazy? And so that anger that's there is not able to be expressed. Maybe there's threats of public humiliation if the victim speaks up like that. So eventually, what happens to that anger? So when it's not expressed, eventually, it becomes repressed. And I'm going to show you a diagram in a moment. But the idea is ultimately it gets buried in the subconscious mind. That anger is an energy. It has to go somewhere. So if it's not expressed externally, it's going to go internal. So here's a diagram. The top part is a conscious mind. The bottom part is a subconscious mind. This is often likened to an iceberg. So you have the tip of the iceberg, that's like the conscious mind, and then you have the actually a large percentage of the iceberg is actually underneath the surface of the water, which is considered to be like the subconscious mind. So when there's an anger trigger, what happens is, and it's not able to be expressed, that anger then gets buried in the subconscious mind like that. So now there's shall we say, a pot of anger that's there. What happens when there's a next trigger? Again, the same thing happens, but now there's more repressed anger. Then what happens when there's a next anger trigger? Again, there's more repressed anger. And like this, it builds up, builds up, builds up. And eventually what happens is the subconscious mind, to protect the person, then hides away all of this anger. It's buried. And sometimes a person will even say, "Oh, I don't feel angry. I'm not an angry person." Because what's happened is they've now developed a default mechanism of when they feel angry for it to get buried and for it to get repressed. And there's a kind of understanding that they think that they are not an angry person. But actually, that anger, especially in certain situations, does come up, but it automatically gets repressed and it's building up, building up, building up inside. So, as this anger is now, shall we say, in this protected state, how might we become aware of it? So, later, what happens is later in life, there might be some anger trigger. What that does is almost like it breaks open that box which has all that anger inside. All of a sudden, that box becomes open, and all of a sudden, this rush, this avalanche of anger comes up to the surface and it comes to the conscious level. Now, all of a sudden, you are consciously aware of all of this anger. And sometimes you're like, where the hell did this come from? So, just to show you, shall we say, how important it is to be vulnerable and to be honest. So, I'm going to be honest and vulnerable with you. There was a few years back, we were called, me and the family, we were asked to help out to renovate a retreat center. This is in Lincoln. And one of the things that we were doing was to get rid of all of the old furniture. So there were these chairs there, wooden chairs, there were wooden tables, wooden furniture that was there. And I was tasked with breaking down the furniture. So I was given a hammer and I was taking that hammer and I was smashing up some of the chairs. I was like absolutely to smithereens. And one of my friends was watching how I was doing this. Everybody else was doing other things. But he noticed this. And afterwards he came to me and he said, "Nij, are you sure you haven't got like unresolved anger in you?" And that really hit me because he saw the way in which I was smashing this. And actually, he was right. Because within the next few weeks and over the next few months, I was in a real bad state. And that repressed anger that had been there from childhood had got triggered from smashing, I guess, using real like this anger energy to break these wooden furniture apart. It triggered that anger to come out, and for a few months actually, that anger was bubbling under the surface for me. So this is what happens like that. In certain cases, there's certain symptoms of repressed anger that are shown, for example, by road rage. Now, if you think about road rage, it always kind of I used to not be able to understand it. It used to shock me. It doesn't anymore. There was a case in 2025 in India, in Bangalore. There was a case where two boys on a motorbike or a scooter, they knocked a wing mirror of a car, and the passengers the driver of the car and his wife, they went into such a rage. They actually chased the scooter, and they eventually knocked the scooter and killed one of the um, one of the people on the motorbike, on the scooter, like that. Like, why does it go to that rage? Okay, it's just a wing mirror. Like, you can pay for that, but why did it get to that level of anger where they were okay to murder them? So one possible reason, obviously I don't know their psychology, but just thinking about it, like a possible reason could be that they have um, suppressed anger, repressed anger. So now that was just the trigger, which then ignited all that dynamite that was already there. It's like repressed anger. You could almost see it like dynamite. Like it just needs a spark, at the right spark, and it explodes. And that's why sometimes at work or even at home, we have fights over trifles. By the way, trifles, I'm not talking about the sweet. Trifles in this case means little things, tiny, tiny little things. If they trigger the right, shall we say, emotional wound, can lead to big anger. So this is especially, we can see when the anger is disproportionate to the event itself. For example, road rage. If somebody cuts us up, why do we feel so disrespected? Because that is a trigger for something else. It's not just to do with the incident itself. And then often what we feel is that this anger is bubbling under the surface. Even if then we're not, shall we say, in a violent angry state, we can often still, we're aware it's there, kind of bubbling away. And then that's when we get to our phone to distract ourselves, or we get on watching this, or we just try to ignore it, and again try to push it down, suppress it again, suppress it and back down. And eventually, we can often then box it up again. The subconscious mind protects us from it again. But here's what we need to be aware of, that if there is an emotional wound there, that can be sensitive. And all it requires is for it to be triggered, for that emotional wound to be triggered, to be somebody to press on it, and especially a loved one to press on that emotional wound, and bang, all of that anger comes out. So, for example, I was called once to a couple. So when I got there, the wife was telling me they'd just been arguing all day long. And when I found out the reason why, I thought it was a little bit strange at first until we broke it down. So in the morning, first thing in the morning, the wife, even before she had opened her eyes, and completely, in one sense, while she was still half asleep, she had passed wind. And he was lying next to her, and when she did that, he flew into a rage, and she was like half asleep, like why are you getting so upset? Like it was an accident. And he was just shouting at her, and they were arguing all day long. So when we broke it down, why was he so angry? When we broke it down, it's really interesting that we discovered that his unconscious rule was, my wife should never disrespect me. And when we broke that down even further, so he felt her passing wind was complete disrespect. So when we broke it down further, what we discovered was his stepmother used to disrespect him all of the time as a child. And of course, she's female. So he had developed this unconscious rule almost, that my wife, and especially females, should not disrespect me. If a female especially would disrespect him, it would trigger all of this dynamite of the anger at the subconscious level. And that's the reason why they were arguing all day. There was in one sense, there was nothing that she could say that would pacify him, because it had triggered repressed anger that was at the subconscious level. So we had to deal with that. And so what we need to realize is that this repressed anger doesn't just heal by itself. It's not just time that heals. It gets buried and it stays there. So we need to actively go through a process of healing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm discussing this today. So when that trigger is activated, when that emotional wound is pressed on, and especially by a loved one, then all of that anger comes rushing out like that. And the reaction, our emotional anger response, is disproportionate to the event. And that's one of the symptoms that we know there's repressed anger. Now, if this cycle keeps continuing, so if we keep going through this and then we kind of box up the repressed anger again, and then there's another emotional trigger, and then we get really angry again, and then we box it up, and then go through that cycle over and over again. Eventually, what starts to happen is we create what I call a fractured ego. So I spoke about this briefly in episode number 2. You can go back and watch that if you haven't seen it. So we have our real self, like as a baby, there's the real self. We're just comfortable being ourselves. But then as we go through certain experiences, so for example, somebody's going through this anger, what can happen is we develop a fractured ego. There are different parts of ourselves. And one part is this anger part where there's this rage, right? If that emotional button is pressed, then we just go off into fly off the handle. We go into this uncontrollable rage because it's repressed anger from the past. There are other states that could be there. For example, sadness, that also comes as part of the anger, as part of not being loved by our parents or caregivers. Sadness could be there. If that repressed anger is there, often there's anxiety. Again, I spoke about this in the previous episode, how anxiety could be a symptom of repressed anger. And there could be other states as well. Um, I have a theory that actually sometimes ADHD is also triggered as a way of protecting ourselves from going into these uncomfortable emotional states. And so we're just like dopamine, 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 dopamine. One client was recently telling me how he has a lot of childhood trauma. And what he did was suppress all of these emotions, and he just buried himself in his work. He was really good at his work, and he just worked really, really hard. And therefore, he didn't need to deal with all these uncomfortable emotions. But naturally, these uncomfortable emotions come up as soon as, he's started spiritual practices, doing things like meditation. These emotions come up and they're uncomfortable. And so now we're starting the process of healing. The problem here is that the more time we spend in whichever state it is, it grows. So if you're finding more and more and more you're in this angry state, guess what? That state starts to become the more dominant state, and the real self, the real you, starts to decrease. It could even come to the point where where you don't know who is the real self. Like this nice person that I used to be, it's like, that's not me anymore. Now I'm this angry person, this always in a rage, always moody, like that. And so that's obviously a red flag that shows that we need to deal with it, because no, the real self is always the real you, who you are, who you were as a baby. You weren't an angry baby. The real self, that happy, joyful, often playful, whatever your personality is, that's the real you. The angry state is part of the fractured ego. It's a trauma wound, and it needs healing. So let's just quickly run through what are possible signs of repressed anger. So the first one is you avoid conflict or any kind of confrontation. And one of the reasons why is because you can't deal with your anger. You already know that if you get angry, you don't just get a little bit angry, you already know you fly off the handle. So often what happens is you will avoid confrontation because you know what's going to happen as a result. Or sometimes you're uncomfortable with other people's anger. And that's why you're not comfortable with conflict. You never feel angry. So even when a boundary is transgressed, you don't necessarily exhibit anger, even though in one sense you could say you should. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and this one lady, she was talking about how she was with a famous comedian, and then he started touching her inappropriately, and she didn't get angry. Instead, she started laughing nervously, and eventually she left the situation. But the point is, she never complained to her, she never told anybody, and she was never angry at that person. Then in that discussion, so this was with like a trauma specialist, Gabor Mate, you may have heard of him. So he was explaining to her that the reason why she never expressed that anger was because in childhood, was she allowed to express anger? And she said no. She would always, it was not safe for her to express anger. So now that had become a default mechanism. She repressed her anger. So even in a situation where a boundary is transgressed, the anger was no longer expressed. It was immediately repressed like that. And he was explaining to her that now it's time to change the belief. It's time to bring that out. You are allowed to be angry now. You're an adult. You're a grown adult. You're not in that same situation where you were as a child, where could even be dangerous to express your anger. So that is an indication. That could be an indication if you never feel angry. Sometimes there is anxiety for no real reason, um, and then your mind even makes up a reason as to why you're feeling the anxiety. But actually, it could be a symptom of that repressed anger. And because that anger is bubbling under the surface, your body is like, it doesn't know what to do with it. So the symptom of that repressed anger is anxiety. And then we have passive aggressive behavior. And this is like we hold back, we hold back, we hold back until we explode. So one example which very nicely captures the passive aggressive mood is if you take a volcano. So the anger in the volcano could be represented by the lava. And so what happens is there's all this repressed anger from the past, and it's dormant. It's like a dormant volcano. But then what happens? There's a trigger, and that trigger creates more lava, and gradually more lava, and then something else happened. But externally, that person just seems like they're totally passive. They seem like they're totally chilled. There's no anger. Like everything is all good. But that anger is building up inside, building up, building up, building, until eventually there's one more trigger, and then bang, they just go from 0 to 100. And it's just like, where did that come from? So that's just like the volcano. So the anger is building up, building up, building up. So the anger is there, but they're just not expressing it in a healthy way. They're not expressing it timely. And so one of the when this happens, I often tell clients is that actually you need to express the anger in a timely way so it doesn't build up and become like a volcano and explode like dynamite. And people are like, oh my God, I thought this person wasn't angry. No, they're passive aggressive. What we want to learn to develop is to be assertive, which is neither passive and neither aggressive. Assertive is where you're able to express the anger in a healthy way. And then just a few more signs of repressed anger is when we feel guilty or shame whenever we get angry, because we were told as a child, it's wrong to be angry. Why are you angry? Like that, so we feel guilty about it. But we still feel angry. So what do? So sometimes we hold grudges against people. Sometimes we even break relationships off forever because somebody did something to us. We hold that grudge or ruminate on things that upset. Like it just goes on and on and on, but we never actually express that anger. And sometimes when that anger builds up, but we don't feel comfortable actually expressing it, sometimes we start thinking about revenge. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you think about what you would like to do to that person, and it's like it's not that you would actually act it out, but it's like that's one way that anger is almost like pacified within you. This is all signs of repressed anger. And then this is a really horrible one, actually. I feel really bad when clients come to me with this, is that they lash out on their loved ones. They're overly harsh or sometimes even brutal with a loved one. So they've got all this repressed anger. They don't express it at work. They don't express it with society or their friends in social gatherings. But when they're at home, because there's all this repressed anger, they just lash out. Because where else is it? It's got to come out somewhere. And so they just lash out on their loved ones. And it's almost like, I know my loved ones won't leave me and they will still always love me. And therefore, it's almost like okay to lash out on the loved ones. And it's really painful for the loved ones. So again, we have to deal with the repressed anger in the first place at the root, deal with that at the root, and then all these things won't happen. And one thing just to be aware of, that if we do lash out onto our kids, then what happens? This is generational trauma. So now our kids develop repressed anger often, and then they will do the same to their kids, and then they will do the same to their kids, and it continues. So one of the reasons why I do these sessions is to break the cycle. Now, be aware that there may be some physical, emotional ailments that happen as a result of repressed anger. For example, high blood pressure, could be heart problems, even heart attack, chronic stress, insomnia, or sleep issues. One of the reasons for sleep issues is because the muscles are tense. So when you're trying to sleep, if your muscles don't relax, you can't actually sleep. So one thing I definitely say with insomnia or sleep issues is one of the things is watch things that make you laugh, especially at night time. As soon as you start laughing, you'll notice your muscles relax, and that allows you then to sleep. So that's one of the things that I used to do. Sometimes I still do is I'll watch something funny at night time, like something like Michael McIntyre, clean jokes, nice jokes, and you're just laughing about stupid things, and everything, your whole body begins to relax. The muscle tension begins to subside, and then that allows you to go into a nice, relaxing, a deep sleep state. Sometimes you'll find that there's apathy, you just can't be bothered, or sometimes we find that we're dissociated. So, in other words, we kind of switch off from reality, and time just seems to pass by and we don't even realize it because we are um, kind of dissociation means kind of separated from our emotions, from our mind, because there's so much like um, I call it like bubbling under the surface. All these anger issues and all these memories that are there from the past, we dissociate from reality in order to actually dissociate from those uncomfortable emotions. And it's natural to do that. This is a coping mechanism, and especially we most likely developed that even as a child. And then finally, the final one I wanted to just discuss here. There are others, but the final one I wanted to discuss are impulsive or destructive behaviors. And especially that can lead to addictions or even substance abuse. And again, it's the same thing. It's like trying to um, dissociate from reality. In other words, change our consciousness away from those uncomfortable emotions. Dopamine, 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 like that. So these are some of the physical or emotional ailments that could happen. So, how do we start the process of healing from repressed anger? So, one of the first things we have to do is change the beliefs about anger. Remember, most likely as a child or even as an adult, we may have gradually developed the belief that anger is bad. So we've got to start there. Expressing anger is bad, or even anger is bad. So the first thing is identify what beliefs do you hold that stop you expressing. So I wanted to ask you if you could say in the comment, what are some of the beliefs that you hold that stop you from expressing your anger? And then what are healthy beliefs that you can now adopt? So I'm going to ask you again in the comment section, what are healthy beliefs that you can now adopt? Because we can see that repressed anger is not very good. So what are some healthy beliefs you can adopt? So that's an exercise for you to do. Go away and identify what the beliefs are and what can you change them to become healthy. So you're allowed to express anger in a healthy way. And then install those new beliefs into the subconscious mind. I generally do it through hypnotherapy. So what you do is you envision yourself actually um, being that person and then you almost like step into that person and you become that person. And you see how you handle a difficult situation, a situation where you're angry, and how you handle your anger in such a nice way. So it's kind of like empowering yourself. And then start to develop a healthy behavior with anger. Start to practice it. And that way, the anger is not being repressed and repressed and repressed. But it first of all starts with your beliefs about anger, because unless you don't change them, what will happen is as more and more situations happen, that anger will just get more and more repressed. So that, shall we say, to deal with it from this point onwards. The other aspect is to go to the past. So we need to heal those emotional wounds from the past, the repressed anger that's there. So you can do that through therapy. Get a therapist. I use hypnotherapy with my clients, and we often go back to the past and we go to that child who went through those experiences, and we help that child to actually let go of those, to release the anger, and sometimes even go through a forgiveness process with that person. There's one technique you can use where you sit in a chair and you put the person that you're angry with in the other chair, and then you speak. But then his interesting thing is then you almost go into the body of the other person and you see things from their perspective. You look at your mum, you look at your dad from their perspective, what they did to you. But seeing it from their perspective, it's like that can often bring out some compassion. And you can understand actually our parents, and I always say this point, our parents did the best that they could. But that's a intellectual process. So remember that quote. Um, so there is one quote that one of my mentors said, is like, you can't think your way out of an emotion. You have to feel your way out of an emotion, like that. So if there is the feeling of anger, you can't intellectualize your way out of the anger. You can't say, yeah, yeah, I just forgive the person. You actually have to feel your way to forgiveness. Very important. So I use hypnotherapy with my clients to do that. Now, I just want to put a warning here. Don't just talk about your trauma with a friend or a loved one or whoever it is just randomly, because that can sometimes re-trigger the trauma and it can re-trigger all of that anger to come out. So it's very important that you go through a proper therapy process where the therapist will then close the box afterwards. So it's safe. I have some workbooks. So if you go to www.nijday.com/store, you'll be able to find some workbooks where you can work through your anger. So you can go through yourself. There were some questions there that will help you to release that anger, deal with the emotional wounds. There are self-help books, trauma healing type books that you can look up, and you can go through those. There's even meditation tracks on YouTube you can do to help you experience the emotions and let go. Another way of kind of releasing or dealing with those emotions, at least first of all, identifying what happened, is journaling. Okay, what did I go through? What did that inner child, what did that younger version of me, what did they go through? And journal, oh my God, I felt like this and I felt like that, and I'm really angry at this person, and I got bullied or whatever it was, and this is how I felt, etc., etc. And journaling all of that, actually letting it come out, and then actually feeling those emotions. It's really important. Like I said, you can't think your way out of the emotion. You have to feel your way out. So through meditation, especially sitting with that inner child and allowing those emotions to come out. So journaling and meditation, you can use those together. And so ultimately what we want to do is release that past anger, sit with those emotions. Now, an interesting aspect, again, is experience that anger in your body. There's a there's a famous coach, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he explains that thoughts are the language of the mind. And he says that emotions are the language of the body. So here the anger, it's not about intellectualizing it, it's about feeling it. So experience that anger in your body directly and go through it and then let it go. So kind of understanding that it's there and it's like releasing that anger. And of course, experiencing that anger, it's important that we don't lash out. It's important that we don't act out on the anger. The point about experiencing it is then to let go. And I'm planning to do a workshop in the future on releasing these emotions. It's a hypnotherapy session. Or you can have one-to-one sessions with me, and I also help you release these emotions from the past, not just anger, so many whatever emotions that are there, the sadness and so many other emotions that are blocked up inside of us. So finally, I wanted to end by doing just a little meditation. So if it's safe for you to do so, you want to close your eyes, take a nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. You've gone through this episode. I'm sure for many of you it may have been quite intense. So let's just end on a peaceful note. So again, nice deep breath in through the nose and really aim to fill your lungs from the very bottom all the way up to the top. And exhale nice and slowly. And again, nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Nice slow deep breath. Now, I want you to imagine that you're in a safe place. A memory from the past, or make up a memory. Make up a place. And make that place a really peaceful place. Maybe it's by the beach. Maybe it's your favorite holiday spot. Or maybe it's just a place at home. A place nearby. Maybe the sun is shining and you're just totally relaxed. And you know you're relaxed because your breathing is nice and deep. You're just in this space of being safe, in this space of just being totally relaxed. And just feel all the muscles of your body relaxing deeper and deeper. And starting from the top of your head, just imagine there's this wonderful relaxing feeling coming down from the top of your head, relaxing all the muscles of your body as it does so, relaxing your cheek muscles, and it massages all your internal organs too. Massages your brain. Have you ever had a brain massage? Here you go. And as it comes down through your head, it goes down, this wonderful relaxing feeling down through your neck and into your shoulders. And imagine all these wonderful soft hands just massaging all your shoulders. And feel the tension in your shoulders almost like melting away as those hands just massage away. And then this lovely, either warm or cool feeling, relaxing feeling going down through your arms, down all the way through your hands, all the way to the tips of your fingertips, and just relaxing your entire arms as it does so. It's almost like a tingling feeling at the end of your fingertips. Allow this lovely relaxing feeling now to go down through your shoulders, down through your back, and down through your chest, through your stomach, relaxing and massaging all the internal organs as it does so, relaxing all the muscles as it does so, and down through your pelvic region into your thighs. Just relaxing your thighs, down through your knees and into your calf muscles, relaxing every single muscle of your body as it does so, down through your ankles and into your feet, and all the way to the tips of your toes. Feel that tingling feeling in the tips of your toes, and maybe just wiggle your toes as you feel this lovely feeling just washing away any tension in your body, leaving you in this wonderful state of relaxation and peace and calm. Now take a nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And again with me, nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one last one together. Nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as I count up to 5 now, come back up to full waking consciousness, feeling totally alert and ready to continue your day. 1, 2, 3, 4, wide awake 5.
In this video, we explored how anger often comes from childhood moments where we weren't allowed to express how we truly felt. Instead of releasing it, we push it down, and our repressed anger builds like water trapped in a blocked pipe, ready to burst out when it can no longer be contained. That's why small frustrations today can lead to big reactions. But this anger can be healed through awareness, inner work, and support. With understanding, anger can be something we control, rather than something that controls us. Like and subscribe for more videos about healing, self-awareness, and emotional mastery.